They mocked Michael Jordan for his skin color. They said he didn't belong. But the GOAT didn't just prove them wrong. He walked into the boardroom of the largest company, stared the untouchable CEO down, and fired him on the spot. The move left the entire corporate world speechless. This is how Michael turned ridicule into absolute dominance. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of Titan Global's headquarters in Dallas, Texas. Michael Jordan pushed his cleaning cart through the lobby, his movements deliberate and methodical. The same security guard, who had checked his ID badge every morning for the past 3 years, barely glanced up from his phone. To him and to everyone else in this towering testament to corporate success, Michael was just another invisible man in a gray uniform. He maneuvered his cart around a group of executives engaged in animated conversation, their designer suits and practiced smiles a stark contrast to his worn work clothes. None of them bothered to acknowledge his presence or step aside. Michael had learned to navigate these human obstacles with the same precision he once used to weave through defenders on the basketball court. Another merger acquisition in the works, he thought, catching fragments of their conversation. Another round of layoffs coming. His hand tightened around the handle of his cart, but his face remained impassive. He'd mastered the art of being invisible while seeing everything. The executive elevator dinged, and CEO Richard Thompson emerged, his presence immediately commanding attention from everyone in the lobby, everyone except Michael. Thompson's reputation for ruthlessness was well earned, his leadership style a reflection of his belief that compassion had no place in business. "Jenkins!" Thompson's voice boomed across the lobby. A young analyst nearly dropped his coffee and say, his haste to respond, "Where are those projection reports I asked for?" "Sir, I'm still compiling the data. The international markets, I don't want excuses, I want results. Have it on my desk by noon or clear out your office." Thompson's eyes swept past Michael as if he were part of the building's architecture. "And somebody clean up that coffee spill. This isn't a college cafeteria." Michael watched as Jenkins scrambled to pick up his scattered papers, his hands shaking. Without a word, he reached for his mop, carefully cleaning around the young man while he gathered his belongings. Jenkins muttered a quiet, "Thank you," one of the few acknowledgements Michael had received in months. Back in the janitorial closet, Michael pulled out his worn leather notebook. With practiced discretion, he recorded the morning's events, adding them to 3 years' worth of similar observations. But this notebook wasn't just a record of corporate cruelty. It was evidence. Evidence that would soon shake Titan Global to its foundations. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a secure line known to only 2 people in the world. The text message was brief. "Board meeting moved to Friday, they're pushing the vote." Michael's jaw tightened. They were accelerating their timeline, trying to force through another round of aggressive cost-cutting measures before the quarterly. Reports. Measures that would devastate hundreds of families, disproportionately affecting minority employees and support staff. He glanced at the small photo tucked into his notebook, himself and David Chen, taken decades ago at their college graduation. David, whose brilliant mind had built Titan Global from the ground up, whose vision had been of a company that could change the world for the better. David, who had trusted Michael with not just his shares, but his dream of what the company could. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped the notebook shut. Michael resumed his cleaning routine, invisible once more. But beneath his carefully maintained exterior, his mind was racing. Thompson and his allies on the board were moving faster than anticipated. The careful plan he'd been crafting would need to be accelerated. As he worked his way through the building's 50 floors, Michael observed everything. He saw Sarah from accounting crying in the stairwell after another hostile interaction with her supervisor. He watched as Thompson's inner circle gathered in their private conference room, their voices carrying through the supposedly soundproof glass as they laughed about their latest optimization strategy. In the employee break room, he listened. As a group of middle managers discussed the rumors of impending layoffs, their faces drawn with worry. Among them was Maria Rodriguez, a senior analyst who had worked her way up from an entry-level position over 15 years. She was one of the few who occasionally spoke to Michael, not with condescension but with genuine kindness. "They can't just throw people away like this," she was saying, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We're not numbers on a spreadsheet." But Michael knew that's exactly how Thompson and his board viewed their employees. He'd seen the documents, heard the conversations, witnessed the systematic dismantling of every policy David had put in place to protect workers' rights and promote diversity. As the day wore on, Michael continued his rounds, each floor a new chapter in the same story of corporate greed and human cost. But today felt different. The weight of his secret identity, of the responsibility he carried, pressed harder than usual against his chest. The time for passive observation was coming to an end. In the executive bathroom on the top floor, Michael cleaned the mirrors until they gleamed, aware of the security camera watching his every move. Let them see what they expected to see. Just another middle-aged janitor doing his job. They had no idea that the man they looked through every day held enough voting shares to change everything. The sun was setting by the time Michael finished his shift, casting the same long shadows across the lobby floor. As he pushed his cart toward the service exit, he passed Thompson in the lobby, now berating Jenkins for some perceived deficiency in his report. The young analyst's face was a mask of barely contained despair. Michael stepped into the elevator, alone with his thoughts and his plans. Tomorrow would be another day of observation, of gathering evidence, of being invisible. But soon, very soon, everything would change. The question was, would he be ready when the moment came? As the elevator descended to the basement level, Michael thought about David's last words to him. Sometimes the greatest power lies in being underestimated. He hadn't understood then just how true those words would prove to be. The following morning brought chaos to Titan Global's headquarters. Michael arrived early, as always, but today the lobby was already buzzing with nervous energy. Clusters of employees huddled around their phones, their faces illuminated by the glow of breaking news notifications. The company's stock had plunged in pre-market trading, responding to rumors of financial irregularities that had somehow leaked to the press. Michael navigated through the anxious crowds, his cart a shield of invisibility. He caught fragments of conversations, whispers about suspicious transfers, questions about offshore accounts, concerns about job security. On the trading floor, analysts scrambled to contain the damage, their voices rising above the usual murmur of market watching. Thompson's arrival sent a ripple of tension through the building. The CEO's face was thunderous as he stormed toward the executive elevator, followed by a trail of nervous assistants. "Find out who leaked this," he barked into his phone. "I want names on my desk within the hour." From his position by the water cooler, Michael methodically wiped down surfaces while observing the unfolding drama. He knew exactly where the leak had come from. It was the first move in a carefully orchestrated plan. The documents had been anonymously delivered to select journalists by his most trusted ally, a former board member who had resigned in protest years ago. As he moved through his routine, Michael's thoughts drifted to the meeting he'd had the previous night. In a quiet diner on the outskirts of town, he'd sat across from Judge Patricia Martinez, one of the few people who knew his true identity. Her decades of experience fighting corporate corruption had made her an invaluable advisor. "The timing has to be perfect," she had warned, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "Thompson's allies on the board are powerful. They'll fight back hard once they realize what's happening." Inside that envelope was everything Michael needed: legal documents, witness statements, financial records that painted a damning picture of Thompson's leadership. But more importantly, it contained proof of something even more sinister: systematic discrimination in hiring and promotion practices, carefully hidden behind a veneer of corporate policy. Now, as he cleaned the executive conference room windows, Michael could see Thompson and his inner circle in an emergency meeting. The CEO's face was red with rage as he jabbed his finger at various documents spread across the table. Through the glass, Michael could read the tension in their body language, the growing fear in their eyes. Maria Rodriguez passed him in the hallway, offering a small smile despite her obvious distress. "Crazy morning, huh?" she said, clutching. "A stack of reports. They're saying we might lose major clients over this." Michael nodded sympathetically, but said nothing. He'd learned long ago that silence was often the best response. Besides, he knew Maria would soon have much bigger concerns. The next phase of the plan would directly impact her department. By midday, the tension in the building had reached a fever pitch. Security guards were posted at every entrance, and IT teams rushed between floors, presumably checking for data breaches. Michael continued his rounds, gathering intelligence with every sweep of his mop. In the employee break room, he overheard Jenkins and another analyst discussing the morning's events. "It's not just the financial stuff," Jenkins whispered. "I heard they're looking into discrimination complaints, years' worth of them buried by HR." Michael's hand steadied on his mop handle. That particular leak hadn't been part of the plan. Someone else was apparently taking advantage of the chaos to expose their own grievances. It was an unexpected development, but one that could work in his favor. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the building's vast floors, Michael received another secure text. "Board emergency meeting called for tomorrow morning. They're panicking." A small smile touched his lips before quickly disappearing back into his practiced neutral expression. He made his way to the basement storage room, ostensibly to restock his cleaning supplies. In reality, he needed to make a crucial phone call. In the privacy of the dimly lit space, surrounded by industrial cleaners and paper products, he contacted his legal team. "It's happening faster than we anticipated," he said quietly. "Thompson's getting sloppy. He's already violating protocol by not notifying all shareholders about the emergency meeting." The response was immediate. "We're ready, the injunction is prepared, and we have people standing by. Just say the word." Michael ended the call and leaned against the storage shelves, allowing himself a moment to feel the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow would change everything, not just for him, but for every person in this building who had ever been made to feel invisible. As he resumed his duties, Michael passed Thompson's office one last time. The CEO was alone now, staring out at the Dallas skyline with a glass of whiskey in his hand. For a moment their eyes met in the reflection of the window, the powerful CEO and the humble janitor. Thompson's gaze slid away dismissively, but not before Michael caught a glimpse of something in his eyes. Fear. The day ended as it always did, with Michael pushing his cart toward the service elevator. But tonight was different. Tonight he wasn't leaving as just another invisible employee. Tonight he was leaving as a man about to reclaim his power and fulfill a promise made to his oldest friend. In his pocket, he carried a board member identification badge that hadn't seen the light of day in 3 years. Tomorrow he would finally use it. The boardroom of Titan Global buzzed with nervous energy as executive members filed in for the emergency meeting. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. Richard Thompson sat at the head, his usual commanding presence somewhat diminished by the dark circles under his eyes and the slight tremor in his hands as he shuffled through papers. The cleaning cart's familiar squeak drew irritated glances as Michael made his routine morning rounds. He took his time wiping down the glass walls, watching as more board members arrived, their faces tight with concern. Among them was Victoria Chang, the newest addition to the board and one of Thompson's strongest allies. She barely concealed her disgust as she had to step around Michael's cart. "Can't this wait?" she snapped at no one in particular. "We have more pressing matters to discuss than streak-free windows." Michael continued his work, unhurried. He could feel the weight of the board member badge in his pocket, knowing the moment of revelation was approaching. Through the glass he observed as Thompson began the meeting, his voice carrying despite the supposed soundproofing. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face an unprecedented crisis," Thompson declared, standing to address the room. "Someone is attempting to destroy everything we've built. The leaks to the press, the allegations of discrimination, it's a coordinated attack on our company." Michael's phone vibrated silently in his pocket, the signal he'd been waiting for. His legal team was in position, and the additional documentation had been delivered to the relevant authorities. There would be no turning back now. As Thompson continued his speech, Michael quietly slipped away from his cart and walked to the service elevator. In the basement locker room, he opened his assigned locker for the last time. Inside hung not just his spare uniform, but also a garment bag containing an impeccably tailored suit, one that had waited 3 years for this moment. 10 minutes later, Michael stood before the mirror in the employee restroom adjusting his tie. The transformation was striking. Gone was the slouching janitor in grey coveralls, replaced by a man whose presence commanded respect. He reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope containing documents. That would change everything. The board meeting was in full swing when Michael returned to the top floor. Through the glass, he could see Thompson gesturing animatedly, outlining his plan to contain the situation. Several board members nodded along, while others looked skeptical. Victoria Chang was taking detailed notes, occasionally shooting sharp glances at those who seemed less than fully supportive. Michael took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and pressed his badge against the reader. The door clicked open. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as heads turned toward the intrusion. Thompson's face darkened with anger. "What is the meaning of this? Security?" "That won't be necessary, Richard," Michael said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that filled the room. "I believe I have every right to be here, as the majority shareholder of Titan Global." The silence that followed was deafening. Thompson's face went from red to pale in an instant. Victoria Chang's pen clattered to the table. Several board members exchanged confused glances, while others seemed to be putting pieces together, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning recognition. "This is absurd," Thompson finally managed. "You're the janitor. Security!" Michael laid his envelope on the table, removing several documents. "I am Michael Jordan, and I hold 51% of this company's voting shares, transferred to me by David Chen before his departure. Every document here is legally verified and notarized." The room erupted in chaos. Board members talked over each other, some demanding explanations, others calling for verification. Thompson remained frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "For 3 years," Michael continued, his voice cutting through the noise, "I have watched this company lose its way. I've witnessed discrimination, harassment, and the systematic dismantling of everything David Chen built. I've documented every instance of misconduct, every violation of corporate ethics, and every decision that put profit above people." He began distributing copies of his documentation. "You'll find here detailed records of discriminatory hiring practices, wage disparities, and evidence of financial misconduct that I'm sure the SEC will find very interesting." Victoria Chang leafed through the papers, her face growing increasingly pale. "This can't be legal. You've been spying on us." "I've been observing," Michael corrected. "As a majority shareholder, I have every right to monitor the company's operations. The fact that none of you could see past a janitor's uniform speaks volumes about the culture we need to change." The door opened again, and Maria Rodriguez entered, followed by Jenkins and several other employees. Both had shed their usual submissive demeanors, standing tall as they took positions around the room. "Ms. Rodriguez has been working with our legal team," Michael explained, "documenting cases of discrimination and harassment that HR systematically buried. Mr. Jenkins has provided evidence of financial irregularities he was pressured to hide in his reports." Thompson finally found his voice. "This is a coup," he sputtered. "You can't just walk in here and—" "Actually, I can," Michael interrupted. "And my first act as active majority shareholder is to call for an immediate vote of no confidence in your leadership." The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. Michael stood at the head of the table, his presence now impossible to ignore. The Invisible Man had become the most powerful person in the room, and everyone knew it. This company was founded on principles of innovation, integrity, and inclusion, Michael said, his voice softening slightly. David Chen believed in building something that would change lives for the better. Today, we begin the work of returning to that vision. The transformation of Titan Global began immediately following that fateful board meeting. Richard Thompson was escorted from the building by security, his personal items shipped to him later. Victoria Chang and several other board members resigned within days, their positions quickly filled by a diverse group of experienced professionals who shared Michael's vision for corporate responsibility. But the real work was just beginning. Michael's first official act as CEO was to call an all-hands meeting in the company's grand atrium. Employees from every department packed the space, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The same security guard who had barely glanced at Michael's janitor badge for 3 years now stood at attention, holding the door as he approached the podium. "For 3 years," Michael began, his voice carrying to every corner of the atrium, "I worked alongside you as a janitor. I cleaned your offices, witnessed your struggles, and shared your frustrations. Today I stand before you not just as your new CEO, but as someone who understands exactly what needs to change." The silence in the room was absolute. In the crowd, Michael could see Jenkins standing taller, prouder. Maria Rodriguez wiped tears from her eyes while maintaining a bright smile. Even the most skeptical employees couldn't help but be moved by the unprecedented nature of the moment. "Starting today," Michael continued, "we're implementing comprehensive changes. Every employee will receive a full review of their compensation to ensure fair pay across all demographics. We're establishing an independent ethics committee with real power to investigate complaints, and we're creating a new department focused specifically on diversity, inclusion, and employee development." The announcements were met with scattered applause that grew into a thunderous ovation. Michael raised his hand for quiet, not finished yet. "But perhaps most importantly, we're changing the culture of this company. No more looking through people. No more dismissing ideas because of who presents them. No more accepting discrimination in any form." In the weeks that followed, Titan Global underwent a remarkable transformation. The fear that had permeated the corridors was replaced by a sense of purpose and possibility. Michael maintained his habit of walking the floors, but now employees stopped to share their ideas and concerns directly. The media attention was intense. Business publications scrambled to tell the story of the janitor-turned-CEO, but Michael insisted on focusing attention on the changes being implemented rather than his personal journey. In interviews, he spoke about corporate responsibility and the importance of seeing people for their potential rather than their position. 3 months after the takeover, Titan Global hosted a gala to announce the David Chen Foundation, a new initiative aimed at providing educational and professional opportunities to underserved communities. The same marble lobby where Michael had once pushed his cleaning cart was now filled with community leaders, educators, and employees celebrating a new chapter in the company's history. During the gala, Michael found a quiet moment to visit his old janitorial closet. The space was exactly as he'd left it, his worn notebook still tucked away on the top shelf. As he flipped through its pages, each entry a reminder of what he'd witnessed and endured, he heard footsteps approaching. "I thought I might find you here," Maria said, now Vice President of Community Relations. "Old habits die hard." Michael smiled, closing the notebook. "Just remembering where we started. How's the mentorship program coming along?" "Incredibly well," she beamed. "We've already matched 50 employees with students from local schools. Jenkins is one of our most active mentors, if you can believe it." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of janitors, their grey uniforms a familiar sight. Michael greeted each by name, having insisted on meeting every member of the cleaning staff personally after taking over. "Mr. Jordan," one of them said, "we just wanted to thank you. The new benefits package, the educational opportunities, it's changing lives." Michael placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "Thank you for the work you do. This company runs because of people like you, and don't let anyone tell you different." Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Michael stood at the window of his office, the same window where Thompson had once stood with his whiskey glass. But instead of surveying his domain with arrogance, Michael watched the cleaning crew beginning their evening rounds, visible now to everyone. On his desk sat a framed photo of himself and David Chen, taken at their college graduation. Next to it was a new photo. Michael surrounded by the first graduating class of the company's professional development program, their faces bright with possibility. A knock at the door announced Jenkins, now heading the company's financial compliance department. Sir, the quarterly reports are ready for review, and you'll be happy to know our ethical business practices have attracted 3 new major investors. Michael nodded, turning from the window. Thank you, Jenkins. And please, it's still just Michael. As night fell over Dallas, the lights of Titan Global's headquarters shone as a beacon of change in the corporate landscape. Inside, employees worked late, not out of fear, but enthusiasm, their efforts driven by purpose rather than pressure. The invisible walls that had once divided people by rank and race had crumbled, replaced by bridges of opportunity and understanding. In his heart, Michael knew that David would be proud. His friend's vision of a company that could change the world for the better was finally being realized. But more than that, the transformation of Titan Global had become a symbol of hope, proof that with courage, persistence, and the right values, even the most entrenched systems could be changed from within.